Okay, what we're going to do now is take a look at how we can run our client application on our API server, which means it's going to be served via our API. So what we'll do is we need to go to our API startup class. And what we're going to do inside here is add the configuration so that we can serve static files from our API server. So what we'll do, and ordering is important inside our startup class middleware. So what we'll do, just below the app.useRouting, this is where we need to add support for serving static files. And what we'll do is we'll say app.useDefaultFiles as one piece of middleware. And default files is going to look for anything inside our www root folder that's called index.html, for example. And we have an index.html. And what we'll also do is we'll say app.useStaticFiles. And this command is going to, by default, serve static files from the www root folder. If we called this folder anything else, then we would need to provide this with configuration, but because it's called www root, then we don't need to give this any config. And what we also want to do, because our React routes need to be served by React Router and our client application, we don't want to confuse our API when a client route is specified, such as /activities. Our API controller is only interested in routes that it knows about, and that's anything beginning with /API or /chat. And what we need to do is provide an endpoint so that it can deal with any routes that it's not aware of. And the way that we do that is we specify another endpoint in here, and we'll say map fallback to controller. And what we'll specify in here is a name of the file we're looking for, or an action, I should say, that we're looking for inside a controller, and we'll call it fallback. So what we need to do is create a controller with an action called index, and the name of the controller needs to be fallback. Obviously we can call this whatever we want, but that's what we'll do to get this working. And inside our controllers we'll create a new class, and we'll call this fallback controller. Now, importantly, we need to make this accessible anonymously. This is our index.html we're going to serve from this endpoint. So what we'll do is we'll say allow anonymous inside here, and we'll bring in ASP.NET Core authorization. If you don't do this, then your index.html will not be served because we've set up require authenticated user in our application, and you simply won't be able to access your index.html, which contains the code, of course, for the user to be able to log in and then access our application. So we're going to derive, in this case, from controller, not from controller base or our base API controller. We need to use the default controller class that we inherit from because we need access to actions. And what we're going to return inside here is a public iActionResult. And we need to call this index to match what we specified in our endpoint. And what we're going to return is a physical file. And we specify the path. And we'll need to bring in system.io. And then we can say combine, and we specify directory. And we'll say get current directory. And then we can specify the paths. And we'll specify www root, followed by a comma, and then index.html, and then after the parentheses we'll add text /HTML as the type of the file that we're going to be returning. And let's just move this down. So what we should find now, if we restart our .NET application, we should be able to browse to localhost 5000 and receive our React client application. So let's take a look. We'll head back to our .NET tab, and we've got some errors going on here, but that's only because we created the controller after we created endpoint. And then what we'll do is we'll just execute .NET Watch Run once again, and once our application has started, we'll head over to our browser. And what we'll do is we'll just say that we want to go to localhost 5000 and press return, and we see our React application. Now from testing, I've already been logged into this, but what we should be able to do is just log out and log back in again, and I'll specify bob@test.com and passwords, and press return, and we've got the same application that we had before, and we're using the same database, so all of the data is going to be the same. But what we do see is a performance boost because we're no longer sleeping our request, so it's going to go very fast and everything should load pretty much instantly. Just a couple of checks to make sure that we can still use the functionality and we can still send comments, and that's fine. And let's take a look at the file sizes, and if we go to our network, and I've still got disabled cache on, so I'll just refresh the page, and we can see inside here the size of the files that are being served. And this is before gzip, so they're slightly larger than was reported in our terminal because the React Create React App shows us the file size after they've been gzipped. But that's not happening at the moment from our Kestrel server. And what we can also see if we go to the console is that we still see our connection activity, but in the React DevTools, now we see that it's using the production build of React. So now we have our React production build. What we're going to take a look at next is using a production database server, and we're going to start to say goodbye to SQLite, and we'll take a look at that next.